welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 113. And the title of this episode is Remember, It's Always the Opposite Before the Economic Collapse. And what I mean by that is any elected official, the Fed, the central bankers, all these people always tell you the wrong information. They always tell you what's really not happening. So whatever they're saying, it's always the opposite. And we see this today with Bernanke, and we see it with what's going on around the world. And everything is smoke and mirrors. It's an illusion. And no one really lets you know what's going on, especially the mainstream media and our government officials and the Fed, which is just a corporation. But before I get started, I just want to thank all the new people who have been subscribing on the YouTube channel and have been coming over to the x22report.com site. And just to let people who have been listening and the new people, you can go to Sentinel Alerts, and it's the top tab on top, and I update that throughout the day. I put my little comments in there so you know what's going on and you know, whatever is happening in the world. And for those new people who want to look at the timeline of the economic collapse, up top it says economic collapse, and that is the timeline from going back from 2001 or so to right now and all the different events that are happening, and I'm continually updating that. And if you haven't visited the people, which is the tab on top, also on top, that is the forum, the people, where like-minded people get together and talk about the economic collapse. People help out with prepping, and lately I've seen a lot of people joining, and it's really great to see new people on the forum, and it is really getting bigger and growing. And if you have something to say, or you have something to offer to help someone, or you just want to find out information and be helped, this is a great place to do it and to meet other people who feel the same way. Okay, let's get started with the economic collapse news. We know Ben Bernanke has been testifying. The stock market, hurrah, is at the all-time highs, and everything's going up. Everything looks fantastic. And to the normal person out there who is just going to work every day, just looking at the newspaper, the mainstream media, everything looks fantastic to them. Everything seems great. The economy seems great. Real estate seems great. Everything is great. But when you push away the smoke and you look past the fog, you see something completely different. And if you look over in Greece, this always astounds me when I see this. Now, Greece is looking to get more debt, and that's the way I look at it. They want like $9.2 billion worth of more debt. Give me some more debt. So to get that debt, what we will do is we will get rid of 25,000 public sector workers by the end of the year. So this way we can add on $9.2 billion, have interest payments on this debt that we can't meet, and we will get rid of the workers. And these workers will have to find something else, and if they can't, then they'll have no more disposable income. They won't be able to pay their rent, and they will not be able to give back into society, and this will cause more problems. And I always find it fascinating what they're trying to achieve here. I mean, really think about this. In your household finances right now, you want $20,000 more debt, so you go to the bank, and the bank says, okay, to get this debt of $20,000, what I need you to do is cut your salary in half. Would you do it? Or what I need you to do to get this more debt is get rid of one car, if you have two. It just seems kind of ridiculous, and it makes no sense whatsoever how this is going to help. It will sustain them for a little while, but just as we've seen, they continually need more debt, because what happens is as you continually pile on debt, you have more and more interest payments, and it's just like a family who continually makes a certain amount of income, continually takes out credit cards, and continually has higher and higher credit card payments, higher debt. At the end, you no longer can sustain it no matter what you do. You can sell all your assets and cut back as much as you want, but you'll always need more. Now, I know that gold and silver, they've been rising again, and they've been smacked down, and they rise again, but they've been realistically they've been pushed down quite a bit. But what's interesting is the U.S. Mint is reporting that 27.6 million silver eagles are sold in July, and this is about 27.6 million ounces, I should say. And if we look at this chart here, a month previous to July, there was only 3.2 million ounces sold. And now in July, it's 27.6 million ounces. So where are people putting their money? They are putting it in an insurance policy, which is precious metals. Now, talking about insurance policy, savings, the American person, savers have lost about $10.8 trillion in the bank since there's really no interest. So they're really seeing a negative effect, especially with inflation going up and no interest in the banks. So they really lost around $10.8 trillion in earned interest on their accounts. And we can look at this in two different ways. The Fed is keeping interest low. And is he keeping it low because he's done this before, where he dares people to get into the stock market, and he wants people to get into the stock market. If the interest rate is low in the savings account and people aren't making money on their money, and they see the stock market continually rising every day, where are people going to where are people going to put their money? Into the market. And I believe that this is the end game of what he wants. And he's not coming out and just saying, I'm going to give you 0% interest in your savings, so put it in the market. He wants people, of course, to make this decision themselves, but he's helping them make this decision by funding the banks of $85 billion a month, where the banks are propping up the equity market. And people are seeing this, and those people who are sleeping saying, hey, why should I keep my money in the bank if I'm only getting 1% or half a percentage? I'll put it in the market, and I can get 5 or 6%. Yeah, it's a little bit more risky, but I haven't seen the market really go down. It's just been rising over and over and over. And my financial advisor, who knows absolutely nothing, is telling me that this is a good place to put your money, because look, since 2008, it's only gone up. It's fantastic. And this seems like this is the central banker's plan, to get everyone in and then pull it out from under them, and everything will be lost. They will make the money, but everyone else will lose their money. Now, I know the jobs numbers have come out, and everyone has always been saying that this can't be the right calculation for unemployment, because they've changed the calculation, just like GDP inflation. They actually even changed the gauge of how many people they need. They used to be 150, and now it's 85,000, that to show that the economy is growing in jobs. But interestingly enough, the job numbers are BS. Of course, we all know that, but people who are not awake do not know this. And the former head of the BLS says, yes, these job numbers are BS. And John Crudell is coming out, and Keith Hall, former head of the BLS, is coming out and saying that the job numbers are misleading. And this goes on to say that Keith Hall says he believes a true reading of those now wanting a job but without one to be more than 10%. And he goes on to say that the level tells Hall that the real unemployment rate is actually about 3 percentage points higher than the BSL number. If the jobless rate is unacceptable at 7.6%, it'd be shockingly bad if he was right and the true rate is 10.6%. And he goes on to say this has been a very slow, very bad recovery, and I think the numbers have really struggled as a result. In fact, I've been very disappointed in the coverage of the numbers. And what he's saying is that these numbers are manipulated to make it look like the economy is doing much better than it is, and the unemployment rate is much higher. But we all knew that. We all understand that everything was changed and manipulated to make things look better. And this all went into the Fed saying if the unemployment comes down, we're going to, stop the QE. We're going to, uh, you know, taper the QE. And this was to make everyone believe that things were getting better. So people would go out and buy housing. People would go and put their money in the stock market. People would start spending, but none of that is really happening. Now, stock prices are outrunning corporate profits. And when did this happen before? And this happened back in the Great Depression. And I did a couple episodes, episodes 6 through 8 or 9, comparing today to the Great Depression. But here are a couple of things that compare to what is going on during the Great Depression and what's going on right now. Consumer prices were deflated about 1.5% per year. House prices were stagnating. The unemployment rate was significantly above its low in the previous business cycle. The European monetary system was at risk of coming apart at the seams due to England struggling to maintain its link to gold at an overvalued exchange rate. And today replace gold with euro and England with periphery, and you have today's conditions in Europe. Germany was near the end of an unsustainable borrowing binge that fueled extravagant local government spending, like China today, and facing near certain sovereign default, like Japan today. The analogy suggests to me that today's Fed is threatening mistakes that aren't unlike those of the 1920s. But what about the stock market? Unfortunately, a few market characteristics fit the late 1920s timeline pretty well. First, PE multiples placed today's stock valuation at levels similar to the latter part of 1928. Second, stock prices separated from corporate profits in the first half of 2013 in a way that's comparable to markets' performance in the 1927 and early 1928s. And we can see this happening, again, I said, in the Great Depression. Just like now, Europe was in a deep recession / depression. The stock market was at its all-time highs, and back then the all-time highs were around 400 points or so. Today they're approaching 16,000 points. But we're seeing the same exact thing. Again, the central bankers have learned how to cover up so people don't notice certain things. Like in the Great Depression, we had, before the collapse, we had high unemployment, people looking for work, tent cities starting to appear, soup line, bread lines starting to form. And what's happening today is you don't see any of that because they've realized if we can cover this up, no one will know what's going on. And how do they cover it up? With food stamps, with welfare, with assistance, with unemployment. All of this allows the people to scrape by without seeing the lines. So when you talk to people who are just going about their daily lives and not knowing about anything, they realize uh, that they see that the economy is doing very, very well. But in reality, it is not, because everyone, around 50 million people or so, are on food stamps, but you don't see them. And this is the big, big difference. Okay, let's move on now. Now, Iran barters 9 million of electricity for wheat from Pakistan. Now, this is a great example of bartering. Now, the U.S. put sanctions on Iran, and they're making it impossible for them to do trade with other countries. So what they decided to do, with an agreement with Pakistan, was um, to import wheat valued at 9 million from its eastern neighbor in exchange for electricity. So this is a brilliant idea, and we can see when the collapse comes around the world, you need things to barter with, because in this case they can't use money because of all the sanctions and everything that's put in place. So they were at one time they were trying to they were selling their oil and everything for gold, and then the additional sanctions were put on Iran, and now they're left to bartering. And this is like I said, a great example where when the economic collapse hits and money is not that important at a certain period of time, and you have rice and someone has medical supplies, that could be an even exchange. And this is why it's good to prep. It's another good reason to prep. Okay. Now, China is sending troops to Africa. Now, U.S. has sent troops to Mali in Africa. The French have sent troops to Mali in Africa. Now, why does everyone go? Why does everyone want to go into Mali? You hear Al Qaeda. We're fighting. There's new insurgents happening. People are the humanitarian reason. All this other crap that they throw out there. But the real reason why all of these countries and central bankers are trying to get in, and even China, is because Mali is the world's third largest gold producer. Again, I've said this before, the central bankers, and China knows this, they want hard assets. And wherever they are, you will find a central banker. You will find the U.S. government. You will find any Western central bank controlled country. You will find them fighting a war that really doesn't exist to get the natural resources and to control the country. That's all there is. That's what it's all about. And we see this happening more and more. Japan to deploy ships after China detected drilling in disputed waters. Now, China is drilling for oil near the Senkaku Islands in the eastern China, and this is the island that they're fighting over. And again, here we are now. The real reason comes out of why they want to be in this region, because there are natural resources here. There are hard assets, and like I said before, wherever you see these Western-backed central banks, you will see the central bankers going for these hard assets. And here we are off the coast of Japan and China in this island, fighting over hard assets again. And this is what it's all about. And again, this is also fueling the war that will eventually cover up the economic collapse. Because at this point in time, the central bankers and other governments like China and Russia are all rushing to make claims to where all of these natural resources are, because they know what's coming. They know what's going to happen. Now, I thought it was very interesting that the Syrian refugees are begging John Kerry for a no-fly zone. It's just hard for me to believe that they're coming out and they're saying, "Oh my God, John Kerry, you know what we really need? We need a no-fly zone." I mean, come on, really? What this really is the United States government wants to put boots on the ground inside Syria. And this goes on to say U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Thursday visited a camp for Syrian refugees displaced by the fighting of their country, hearing firsthand accounts from Syrians who have fled that UN says is the worst humanitarian crisis in decades. Of course, let's just get this straight now. The United States government and the central bankers hired paid mercenaries to go into Syria to create a false revolution. These same people started fighting amongst each other, and they have been using chemical weapons on the Syrian people and causing death and destruction everywhere they go. So, okay, this is the worst humanitarian crisis in decades caused by the central bankers and the U.S. government. Okay, let's just get that straight. And the Syrian people, we are begging you for a no-fly zone, said Hamalat Abu. I mean, really? This is what this person said? This is what they're asking for? And Kerry responded to this. A lot of different options are under consideration. I wish it was very simple. As you know, we've been fighting 2 wars for 12 years. We are trying to help in various ways, including helping Syrian opposition fighters have weapons. We're doing new things. There is a considerable buffer zone and other things, but it's not as simple as it sounds. And a British Army chief has warned that attempts to impose a no-fly zone over Syria would be unsuccessful without establishing ground control. And the U.S. government is trying to maneuver their way into Syria, which brings me to my next point. The U.S. preparing for military action in Syria, top U.S. general says. President Barack Obama is considering using military force in Syria, and the Pentagon has prepared various scenarios for possible United States intervention. General Dempsey said that the administration was considering using kinetic strikes in Syria and said, "Issue is under deliberation inside our agencies of government." And this went on to say, President said previously that the use of chemical weapons would cross a red line and likely trigger American intervention. When the White House concluded Assad had relied on chemical warfare, Rhodes said both the political and military opposition is and will be receiving U.S. assistance. And so it's funny. The rebels have used the chemical weapons, and the UN reported this in the first go-around. The United States government, stamped its feet and said, that's not fair. Look at this again. So the UN went back in and said, all right, I guess both sides did. Does that make you feel better? And the government said, aha, they just crossed the red line. Now we're going to go in and get them. And this is what's happening because their backs are against the wall. They don't know what else to do at this point. The American people, Congress, are not up to going into Syria. They want to have nothing to do with it. And one or two things are going to happen. Either Obama is just going to ignore everyone and just go in and do whatever he wants to do, which he has to be very careful about this because of all the NSA spying, Benghazi, IRS scandals. This will just be added another thing on there. But lately he doesn't really care about laws or anything like that or what Congress says. He just does whatever he wants. Or the other thing is they will create an event that is horrific, bloody, to show the people in Congress why we need to get into Syria. And This is a very tricky situation for them because they are running out of options. They don't know what to do, and we will see what happens. Now, on a positive note, the New Jersey Supreme Court, police need warrants to track your cell phone. Finally, someone with a brain who sees like, oh wait, this is violating the Fourth Amendment, and this can't be allowed. But you need the Supreme Court to finally come out and say, and this was in New Jersey, that the court ruled today that the police will need warrants from now on if they want to track crime suspects by tracing the signals from their cell phones. And this should be done all across the country because it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there have been more reports of cyber attacks, and I know today was the Quantum Dawn 2 drill, and that went from 9 to 2:30, and I haven't heard of anything happening, so we can put this potential false flag. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. These are just warnings to let everyone know what's going on, because in the past we've had no warning. So the more information we know, the more we can prep for a situation. And the more we know, the better we do, and the better we can explain it to others, and the more we know and talk about this, and the more people see this, they go, whoa, I just heard about this, that this might be this happening, and it is happening, and then they start putting, the pieces together and figuring out. But now, university campuses are in the cyber attack spotlight. They are receiving around 100,000 daily hacking attempts every day. And isn't Janet Napolitano becoming a president of university? How interesting how this comes out all of a sudden. But hey, this is just building the case of cyber attacks all over the country and the world, and building the case for the main event. Now, there was another article that said from cyber espionage to new era of cyber attacks, and this goes on to say the next level, and we are in this right now, is using the cyber domain to destroy someone's information and or to degrade their network. We are moving from a world in which most cyber problems are mainly about stealing your data to a world in which cyber is being used deliberately to create direct kinetic consequences. They include effects on information, effects on networks, and other adverse physical effects on assets that are valuable to people, like the power grid, like the water system, like the banking system, like the stock exchange. They are letting us know that something is going to happen, and we need to be prepared for this type of action. Now, let's move on here to Bernanke and what has been going on. And the U.S. government will borrow close to $4 trillion this year. And let me just read a couple of things about this $4 trillion this year and what has happened in the past here. Back in 1980, the U.S. national debt was less than $1 trillion. Today, it is rapidly approaching, of course, $17 trillion. During Obama's first term, the federal government accumulated more debt than it did under the first 42 U.S. presidents combined. The U.S. national debt is now more than 23 times larger than it was when Jimmy Carter became president. If you started paying off just the new debt that the U.S. has accumulated during the Obama administration at the rate of $1 per second, it would take more than 184,000 years to pay it off. Let me just say, these central bankers, they knew what they were doing when they made governments, not just this government, but if you go back to England, you go back all the way back, they've done this to every single government. They really know how to put a government into debt and steal their natural resources. If this is the moment you went out and started spending $1 every single second, it would take you more than 31,000 years to spend $1 trillion. If you were alive when Jesus Christ was born and you spent $1 million every single day, since that point you still could not have spent $1 trillion by now. Some suggest that taxing the rich is the answer. Well, if Bill Gates gave every single penny of his entire fortune to the U.S. government, it would only cover the U.S. budget deficit for 15 days. If the federal government used GAAP accounting standards like publicly traded corporations do, the real budget deficit for 2011 would have been $5 trillion instead of $1.3 trillion. The amount the U.S. government debt held by foreigners is about 5 times larger than it was just a decade ago. The U.S. national debt is now more than 37 times larger than it was when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. The U.S. national debt is now more than 5,000 times larger than it was when the Federal Reserve was first created. Yes, this is all for the people. Remember that. They're doing this for you. Now, Bernanke was asked a couple questions today in reference to gold, and his answers are incredible. So one of his answers is Bernanke says gold is an unusual asset. So let's just get this straight here. The Fed, who's not part of the government, is part of a corporation, but the sleeping people around the world don't know this, and they think of him as the head of the monetary financial end of the government. That's the way they see him. And this person is trying to tell all these people that gold is an unusual asset. And he sees gold as a disaster insurance. I agree with that one. It definitely is. It's a disaster insurance to what he is doing. And this is incredible. For the man who's supposed to be, highly educated, knows all about finance, all about money, leading the country for the people of the U.S. because he just wants to help them out. Nobody really understands gold prices. So you're trying to tell me this guy who's head of all of this doesn't understand gold prices? What the hell is he doing there then? And gold may be lower on less concern of extreme outcomes. Now, Bernanke passes the buck on contained student debt, and he's also said this in the past. Back in 2007, the subprime mess is grave but largely contained. In 2013, the amount of the U.S. student debt is large but not particularly likely to cause macroeconomic instability. So he's saying the same thing. Yes, we're screwed and it's going to come crashing down. And like I said, it's always the opposite of what they say. So, there's nothing to worry about here at all. And this is a couple things that went on during the hearing. It's fair to say that house prices are supported by the fundamental strength of the economy. That was then, in 2008. Now, no obvious bubbles as asset prices are supported by the fundamental strength of the economy. Then, I don't buy your premise. We never had a national decline in house prices. Now, confident that the bank regulators will pay close attention to the froth in certain areas. And, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Then, I don't buy your premise. We've never had a national decline in house prices. Now, I would respectfully disagree that inflation measures underestimate the true rate of price increases. Then, confident that the bank regulators will pay close attention to the froth in certain areas. Now, froth in high yield we are monitoring closely, and sustained low rates can prompt reach for yield, but we are monitoring closely. So, again, we've learned this from the past. In 2008, they told us they are not predicting a recession. The housing and the subprime have been contained. There are no housing bubbles. The housing market never declines. And now he's saying the same exact thing. It is always the opposite. the collapse is coming. It will happen much, much sooner than people realize. And it goes on, Bernanke hints of the coming economic collapse. And again, we went over a little bit of this yesterday. Question, are you printing money? Bernanke, not literally. Amazingly, no one said anything after this comment, but far more importantly was the last statement made on the Fed chairman. If you were to tighten the monetary policy, the economy would tank. And that is basically what is going to happen. Now, I will leave you with this 5 reasons why more Americans don't protest against the system. 1. Protest is unwelcome in the matrix. The matrix cannot function properly when people are in the streets speaking truth to power. Therefore, protest is an unwanted inconvenience for the economy, the media, and the government. For this, the government is engaged in quashing domestic protest, and the media makes every effort to marginalize and ignore popular dissent. 2. Conflict consciousness, divided we fall. Are you a liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican? Are you on this team or that team? It doesn't matter at all, really, but we've been brainwashed into dividing ourselves into an inescapable prison of bipolarized pigeonholes. And we were meant to take sides and just argue about that and not understand what the real issues are. And that is what we do today. They created 2 different parties, the Republican, Democrat. This way we can argue about abortion, gay rights, all these different things, when behind the scenes, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, they keep the same advisors, financial advisors, intact. There is no difference. People think there's a difference because of these other issues, but when it comes to the real monetary aspects of the government, there is no difference between both parties. Number 3, higher priorities, work and play. The American dream of personal freedom and the opportunity for prosperity as a reward for hard work has been transformed in recent decades, influenced by an ongoing sales pitch about the life should be like for the average person. Convenience, ease, comfort, entertainment, excess, escape, work, money, debt. These are values most available today. 4, mindset of fear, apathy, and resignation. Mindset is everything in our quantum world, and our emotional undercurrent governs how we relate to any and to participate in the world. Regarding politics, democracy, protest, the typical American mindset generally falls into one of these categories. Number 5, people approve of the status quo. Americans, by and large, are still happy to enjoy the lifestyle that the status quo delivers, even if it means further forfeitures of privacy and essential human rights. Additionally, the lack of public opposition en masse is also a de facto approval of the political and economic status quo. And we can see this today, that people really don't care. They are so zombified, so asleep, so not caring about what is happening to their country, to the world, and what is going to happen, that they think that everything is okay. And the only times you notice that around the world people wake up is when something horrific happens, like 9/11, the Boston bombing kind of shook people up, but then they went back to sleep. And or in 2008, when the whole economy came crashing down, people woke up for a little while and then went back to sleep because the government and the Fed told them everything was going to be okay, and they pumped everything back up. And now we're heading toward this massive, massive collapse, and people are not prepping, not ready, and they will finally get hit and go, hey, how come no one ever told me about this? And at that point, it will be too late. Then all of a sudden, people will be like, where's my money? Let me put it into gold. I can't get gold. Let me get food. Oh, wait a minute. Food is way too expensive. The shelves are cleared off. It will be too late for everyone who is not prepared. Listen, everyone, I want to thank you for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.